I'm James Holder. Welcome to Full Court Football 24. Quite privileged to be joined by former Sheffield Wednesday, Hjk Helsinki, Derry City, Stockbridge Town and Grays Athletic star Vill Powell. How are you, Vill?
Good, thanks, buddy. Good, thanks. Just getting through this experience of lockdown as everybody else is at the minute. But yeah, all good.
I've got to say, it's very challenging times for everyone. We seem to be coming out of the worst of lockdown. You handled everything okay and it's been all right for yourself?
Yeah, I've been fortunately enough. Obviously we've got a small family, and we managed to sort of get through it. As you know, as everybody else, it's been difficult, sort of managing being at home all the time, and then obviously now we're easing up, so it's not too bad so much at the minute. But yeah, just as everybody else, just making sure we stay safe and keep our family safe. It's been good. It's been trying, but you know, we've got to the other side of it.
Glad to hear it. I want to look back on your football journey today. Quite an interesting journey as well. You've had your ups and downs to get into the stage you're at now. I know you grew up around Sheffield area, is that right?
Yeah. I grew up in the Winkerbank area, Sheffield, which is near Meadowall for those that don't know where it is. Sort of started my football journey from there, really, just as football jumpers for goalpost type scenario after school every day.
Now, I'm quite familiar with Sheffield and the Winkerbank area in particular, having spent quite a lot of time there around the boxing gyms and stuff. It's a very tight community. Doesn't matter much about your ethnic background. Everyone mixes and meshes together. It's like a big melting pot of a city. Tell me about your early experiences growing up in Winkerbank.
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously, you know, one of the big things when we were growing up, obviously, was Prince Naseem Ahmed. I mean, I went to school with his brother, and well, he was a little bit older than us, Prince was, but I went to school with his brother Morad and his sister Saba, and yeah, it was very sort of diverse community in Winkerbank, and sort of there was. It was an interesting time. You know, we had a lot of people in sports in and around the area. You got Chris Sedgwick, who you know, went on to have a decent career as well. You had John Newsom, who came from the Winkerbank area. So he's got a very rich sort of sporting and history as Winkerbank. And you know, the community itself was you know, it was very diverse and very welcoming, but also a very tough environment to come up in. You know, he didn't suffer fools easily. Let's just say that.
Tell me a little bit about your family dynamic. Tell me a little bit about your family group. Have you got siblings and stuff?
Yeah, so I've got 4 brothers and 1 sister. 3 older brothers and a younger sister and a younger brother. Yeah, we were all sort of tight knit. There's a big age difference between the oldest 2, and then there's a smaller age difference between the youngest sort of 4. So yeah, we all sort of still get on and spend time together where we can. Mum and Dad, both Jamaican immigrants, came over when they were in their teens. Following their parents, my obviously grandparents, over. Mother was a nurse for the whole of her career. She worked for the NHS as a carer and a nurse. And my dad, he worked in the mainly in the steel industry, and then went into sort of taxi driving later on. And he raised us all. Mum and Dad raised us all. Did an excellent job making sure food were on the table. We didn't have everything we wanted, but we had everything we needed, and that was the main sort of thing, really.
I think it helped having that big family unit and having older brothers helped you with your sporting stuff from an early age.
Yeah, I think the one thing about the family in general is competitiveness. Straight from my dad's one of 11, my mum's one of 7, I'm one of 6. So there was always that competitive element growing up in and around in a healthy way. one trying to outdo the other, whether it was through winding up or whatever it was. There was always that element of challenge. Then, and it stood us all in good stead for later life. There were certainly building blocks, and then obviously in the environment of Winkerbank helped enhance that with the competitive edge and the the sometimes brutal edge of the environment that sort of Winkerbank was. As I said, it didn't suffer fools easily, and if you didn't have that thick skin and you didn't have that resilience to bounce back up after something, then you wouldn't last very long. You wouldn't last very long, and it'd be a difficult place. So, yeah, I think all those elements were key to sort of give that to add to that sort of sporting competitiveness that still stays with me in every aspect of my life today.
What age was you have started playing your first competitive football then? Whether that be for a local team or for your school team, how did that initial involvement in the sport start?
It's weird actually, because funnily enough, I didn't like football as a kid. I didn't really start actually playing the game until I was around sort of 10 or 11. Some of the key assets of that time were I was quick, I was strong, but technically I was rubbish. There was not a lot more kids that were technically better than me at that sort of age group. So it would have been around that time, so 11ish, 12 when I started playing my first sort of competitive football at a junior level for Steel City, and that really just went on from there, and it was all about really just being around my mates. My mates were all into football. Their parents were into football. My parents were more into cricket at the time. It was only one of my older brothers that was into football, but yeah, my parents were more into cricket and athletics at that time.
So after you started playing locally for the local junior team, you're getting involved in the game a little bit more. How did you then take your game to the next level? How did that next sort of thing happen for you?
It was more just the competitive sort of element of Winkerbank, to be honest. What started out as I say, we started getting into football at 10, 11. All my mates were into it, and then you get into that your formative years at sort of 12, 13, 14, and all we did was after school every single day.
Sorry, bro. Just pick up from what you were at school every single day.
Yeah. So after school every single day, we'd go play football on the parks. And that was like our sort of training sessions, and they were really sort of competitive, and we'd play until it was dark or until everybody had to go home, and then sort of from there that just drove me to improve, because obviously and those around me as well drove me to improve, because again, as I said, you were found out pretty early doors if you were up to standard in anything you were doing. There was always that wind-up element of not being the worst player in the group, whether it was football, cricket, tennis, whatever sport we were playing at the time. Basketball was one of the things, but it just seemed to be football, the one that sort of we all stuck with consistently. And then the sort of getting to the next level part, that was more down to a bit of luck, to be honest, because what happened was the scout that actually scouted me at the time was coming to watch another player. We were playing a junior blade team, which is like a representative team for Sheffield United, in a junior game, and he liked what he saw, and he invited me down to Sheffield Wednesday, and it kind of went on from there. Really, I was successful in a week's trial, and they took me on and offered me sort of pro deals and everything else while I was down there.
You must have been on top of the world, being from Sheffield, just literally having that initial like scout coming to watch one of your friends, and then you getting your moment. Must have been an
yeah. It was, and to be fair, I didn't know. Hindsight's a great thing, but to be fair, I didn't really know the magnitude of it at the time. I just thought, oh, well, it's another club, because I didn't really know I know obviously Sheffield Wednesday were a Premier League team at the time and all the rest of it, but you don't really appreciate, the sort of fortune of getting that opportunity until it's gone, until you get older. So yeah, it was sort of massive, and it, my parents were really proud. Clive Baker, who was the School of Excellence director at the time, it's now Academies, but it was School of Excellences back then. Clive Baker, he came into the family home and said what sort of high hopes he had for me and my career at Sheffield Wednesday. I went on to sort of represent England under 16s as well at the time. Throughout my time at Sheffield Wednesday, and obviously signed as a pro there as well, which was a massive thing, for a 17-year-old at the time, and the first one in the whole family who sort of signed a professional contract as a footballer. So it was a great achievement and something I'm immensely proud of.
What was it like then, training day in, day out as a young player with Sheffield Wednesday? How did you sort of integrate with the other players and the players that have been there a long time? Did you make friends instantly? How would you describe that experience?
It was funny because back then football was what I would class as, it was man making. The environment. I mean, that's how I see it. Some individuals might see it differently, but it certainly was an environment where you needed to have thick skin. You needed to have you need to be resilient. You needed to be able to hold your own. So yeah, I actually had the sort of tools, if it were, already sort of ingrained in me from the environment that I'd come from. My home environment with my elder brothers who made sure that, if I was crying for a reason. My social environment in terms of friends and school and stuff like that in the Winkerbank area made sure that I'd already been sort of prepared, if it were, for the football environment in the professional game at that time, which was a tough one, because you had the sort of pros at the time. You had people like Mark Bright, David Hurst, who were from that old school mentality. Peter Atherton, who were definitely from that old school mentality of, you better be ready to come into the first team. You've got to be a tough kid to get in and around it. And they sort of certainly. There was a funny story one time where we had Mark Bright and David Hurst, and David, they were obviously two main strikers at the club at the time, and obviously I was this young upcoming kid who sort of had a little bit of a noise about him coming through and playing for the England juniors and whatever else. And Steve was going, oh, so you want to take my place there? I'm coming to training one day saying, you want to take my place there? And I'm like, 70-year-old kid not knowing what to say, and he's going, all right, okay, you think you're the next big thing? All right, we'll see today, son, we'll see today. And I've gone out to training, and obviously it was just a wind up from his perspective, but from my perspective, I'm like going into training, and I'm nervous as hell, and my slips were brown, let's just put it that way, because I'm expecting all sorts to happen, and it was just a normal training session in the end. But it was just that sort of getting into the psychological element of sort of getting into your head that was that you had to deal with as a young player, and it really was getting you ready for the professional game, because mentally you had to be tough. You have to be tough to be a pro in anything and to succeed in anything, and that environment certainly did that. At that time, it was, from all the players as well. We had players coming from all over. You had players from all over the country and obviously all over Britain. And it was a great experience. It was a really great experience. Some friendships I still hold to this day. I've got friends that I'm still in contact with. We still, we've all got families now, and we still meet up and we still go for drinks and we still do all the rest of it. And this is from those friendships that were built at that time in the late 90s.
We know football was a different era time in the late 90s as it is to now. And a lot of the pranks would go over the top, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
a
definitely.
A lot of the stuff that was taken as jokes probably now would be looked at a different way, with the mental health aspect of football and the underlying bullying. Did you ever see any incidences that you thought were over the top as a young man?
Yeah, you've got to say there were elements of, the week were ironed out quite quickly. I mean, the mentality was, if you couldn't handle it in the training environment, you're not going to handle it in front of sort of 30,000-40,000 people, baying for blood every week, and that was sort of the mentality back then, as to to prepare you for the Premier League as it was back then, or the first team. It was all about sort of ripping the skin off you to start with and then building you back up. So I've got to say, there were definitely elements of that. There were things that certainly nowadays you'd question. There's nothing directly or indirectly that sort of I sort of did and that I would have said was over the top or anything like that. I think the worst sort of cases I saw were a couple of what we'd call boot rooms back then, where you'd have some of the older lads that had been a disagreement on the training ground. It might be a bad tackle or something like that, things that happen on the training ground, and you'd have the older lads go in with, might be one of those younger lads, and they'd have it out. It'd be as simple as that. They'd have it out in the boot room, they'd shut the door, and that was it, and they'd open the door till when one of them had enough. And it was simple as that, and that's the way it was back then. Again, it's not something you'd see, certainly not something you'd see now. I was fortunate enough, probably because I was big and daft enough, not to get involved in a boot room at the time, and I think it was more because I had elder brothers that had reputations. So I don't think that never come. I never come across that, and I never needed to get involved in it. But it did happen. It did happen.
Talk me through being offered a professional contract at Sheffield Wednesday.
Surreal. I mean, again, hindsight was a great thing, and what you don't realise, or what I didn't realise at the time, was one, your actual worth. I know that sounds a bit sort of arrogant, but you kind of just going, I've been offered a professional, because that's all that you, as a young lad, when you're in and around the School of Excellence, all you talk about is a pro contract. And the moment you get offered it, you kind of jump two-footed, just because it's a pro contract, and the lure of it, and the fact that it's what every young kid's desperate for in that environment. At the time, I was doing really well, scoring lots of goals. I set at the time I was setting records for scoring at that level in the junior setup, that only recently got broken by David Hirst's son a few years ago, before he moved to Leicester, and then I think he's gone abroad. But I didn't realise sort of the what I was actually doing at the time and my value, but it was a great honour. Clive and came into the house, as I said, and discussed with my parents the contract offer and everything else. I didn't have an agent or anything like that, representative at the time, and I signed it as soon as it was really offered, really, without even thinking about it. But really proud moment, and really good times, really, from memory, really good times.
Once you signed that contract, did you think you was straight away going to be in the first team? Did you see yourself then as a first team player, or did you think that's when the real hard work started to begin?
Well, I mean, at that point, that's when I thought I was a footballer, definitely. Signing that first professional contract, I thought I was a footballer, definitely. In terms of first team player, no, because it was still an us and them sort of an environment. You weren't involved in the first team until you were. There were elements of training with them that I did, but it was difficult because at the time I was at Sheffield Wednesday, I went through five or six managers, and at the time I signed my professional contract, we had Ron Atkinson as manager, or in that season, and I was doing really well. And I was sort of involved in and around the first team setup in training and bits and bobs, and it looked really promising for the following season. And then he got the sack. Well, when he kept us up, did a great job, and he got the sack, and it was like, whoa! And that's when it kind of everything really changed the following season when Danny Wilson came in, and we went from unity as lots of juniors looking to get into the first team with a chance of getting into the first team and the door being open to getting into the first team and actually playing games, to not to literally not. I mean, the junior team was one of the successful, I think it still is the most successful junior team of that time, and none have been or they've only been equal since, and there was only, I think, one or two players that went on to play in the first team at that time, whereas if Ron Atkinson was still the manager, then a lot more would have, just because of the way he was doing things at the time. So, yeah, I mean, it was twofold. At one point I thought, yeah, I've got a right chance here. I'm on the right path. Atkinson likes me. He's looking to give me opportunities to. Actually, I don't know where this is all going when Danny Wilson come in, because, like I say, it was just like a little bit like falling off a cliff edge when he came in to how he treated the youth players at the club.
Do you feel a lot of players, when Big Ron Atkinson left, had their pathway blocked, where Danny Wilson had preset ideas, maybe couldn't give you for chance or didn't give you for chance? Do you feel that hindered your progress and a lot of progress of the other team in the youth?
Definitely. I think, and it's shown. As I said, if you look at the two comparisons, you had Leeds United at the time, and really in the north of England, you had Leeds' youth set up and Sheffield Wednesday's youth set up, and really we were the two top junior teams certainly in the north of England in and around that time. And if you look at, obviously, how many Leeds players went on under David O'Leary to play in the first team, and Leeds did well with that junior setup, with the likes of Woodgate, Smith, Hewell, all who we were constant rivals with at the time. And then our sort of youth setup, we never really sort of kicked on, and then we were at the time. We won the Junior Premier League. I think they won the FA Youth Cup. So it was like that. That's how intense the sort of rivalry was, and the quality of both teams was. But yeah, they got the opportunities and took them, and went on to have massive success with Leeds and other clubs. But our sort of Sheffield Wednesday, we didn't get that opportunity, and pathways were blocked, and players that didn't have the right hunger or the calibre that were required, didn't perform, and ultimately the team got relegated that season.
Just want to focus a little bit on Big Ron Atkinson.
Yeah,
he's made a lot of headlines for the good and bad reasons over the years and stuff.
Yeah.
What was your experiences like with Big Ron Atkinson?
Brilliant. I've got nothing but praise for Ron Atkinson. At a time when the club was on a downward spiral through sort of mismanagement and low confidence, the club was definitely it wasn't unified in any way. It's definitely isolated in terms of sections and pockets and all the rest of it. And he came in and unified the whole club. He brought everybody back together, everybody fighting and pulling in the right direction. I remember, we were in a relegation battle and we were playing Man United at home. They were obviously at the time. It was their treble season. Yes, it was. It was their treble season, and they were playing us at home. And obviously, they was going for the title. We needed the win to stay up, and we ended up winning the game 2-1. And the fight and the determination to get that victory was all down to how Ron Atkinson had brought everybody back together. Now, in terms of the incident, in terms of some language that is used, what I'd say about that is, this. I always say that there was a time in the country where there was certain language that was accepted. To be fair to Ron Atkinson, I never once heard him use any language that I would have classed as offensive to me or anyone of colour. So I'd certainly, his remarks were a surprise. That made the headlines. But for me, I've got nothing but praise for him. He made a mistake. I don't think, I don't think I understand the disappointment and I understand, but I think the harshness in way was treated because of it. I personally don't think was warranted simply because he was of the amount of sort of black players he'd supported, brought through, give opportunities, and ultimately his actions are bigger than his words for me, and his actions towards black players and people of colour were exemplary, in my experience.
I want to talk a little bit about Danny Wilson's time at the club. Do you think the club took a backward step under Danny Wilson, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think what happened with Danny Wilson is, I think the club was too big for him at the time. Definitely, we had players like Des Walker, you had players like your John Newsom, Paulo Di Canio, Benito Carbones, Wim Yonks. You had players that had exemplary careers and were big characters and big players in the dressing room. And I just felt that at the time that the club warranted a big character manager, and Ron Atkinson was that. And if you were going to get rid of Ron Atkinson, you needed to replace him with someone who had that big character element, because I just don't think that Danny Wilson was capable of managing the characters that he had in the dressing room. You had some very strong characters, very opinionated people that were very respected, and he couldn't. In my opinion, well, it was clear. It was clear to see that he couldn't manage them. He couldn't cope with those big characters, and ultimately it proved fatal for the club. So yeah, I do think they took a backward step in hiring Danny Wilson. That I feel that to this day they're kind of still paying for, because the decisions have just rolled on from there, trying to get themselves back into the Premier League or back into the levels they were at.
I think that's a real interesting point, because you look at the characters like Benito Carbone, Des Walker, like you mentioned, Paulo Di Canio. Yeah. These guys are highly skilled, but highly sort of explosive international players with
definitely
characters, big mannerisms. I'm guessing managing them sort of players is a skill set in itself.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, the one thing Ron Atkinson could do was deal with big characters, because he was a big character himself. Everybody knows that. So he could keep people in check and certainly know what slack to give certain players and when to. He was a carrot and stick manager. He knew when to give the carrot and when to give the stick, and he did it with excellent balance and at the right times. Whereas Danny Wilson was he needed yes men. He needed people to say yes to him all the time. You're not going to get that with people like Des Walker and people like Paulo Di Canio and Benito Carbone. There was an element of I'll never forget it. So generally a Wednesday is when the first team's off. Generally they'll train Monday, Tuesday, and have a Wednesday off. And sometimes the reserves might be in, or the players that haven't played will be in on a Wednesday, depending on on the situation. Now, Paulo Di Canio was one of the hardest workers in the room, if not the hardest worker in the room. He'd come in on his days off and train with us, the reserves. And he'd come in and he would, he'd tell it how it was in terms of the first team and how he didn't feel that Danny Wilson was doing the right things and working the team hard enough. He didn't feel the team was fit enough. He didn't feel the team, worked hard enough. He said that didn't come from the players. He said that come from the managers and that manager. And that's why he was coming in on his days off, because he didn't feel that they were working hard enough. And he couldn't really understand it. And like I say, you go from that contrast of Ron Atkinson, which was about hard work, and desire and all the rest of it, and then you go to Danny Wilson, who's a bit, I don't want to say soft touch, but certainly, that wasn't his template to work from. In terms of that sort of grit and hard work, he was more trying to coach, and it was more, right, you do it my way or not, or we're going to clash. And he was a bit of a character himself in terms of, if you didn't do it how he wanted, you were going to clash, and he clashed with a lot of the big characters, and ultimately in the end, it was no secret at the time, they kind of sort of down tools a little bit for him, and ultimately the club got relegated.
Can you remember any instances where him and Paulo would have clashed, where him potentially would have spilled over?
I mean, it was what would really happen. There's quite a few. I mean, I know of the time where sort of Paulo walked off the training ground, and he was fuming. He was fuming at the standard of training, and he'd come in. We had a tea room at the time, a port cabin tea room. He'd come in and he'd be cursing and effing and jeffing about, how he was being asked to play and how the team was being asked to play, and I know there was a lot of discontent. It wasn't just Paulo. You had Des Walker, being relied on for his, you had Des Walker, who was at the time, I think it was 30, 35 or 36, still an unbelievable centre half. But, Des himself was saying, well, I'm not as quick as I used to be, and I'm being put in positions where I'm getting exposed, and the manager's not seeing that. And he was honest with it. They were saying, I shouldn't be put in these positions. And it was those type of things, really. And we as younger players and youth players, it was clear to see that he didn't have the backing of the senior players and the players that had the most influence in the squad. And there was a lot of discontent during his time then, and it showed. Obviously the incident with Paulo, the manager. You've got two incidents. You had the incident with Cantona, and how Ferguson supported Eric Cantona at the time, and then you had obviously Paulo's incident, which again he did wrong, but Danny Wilson didn't contact Paulo in any way, or give him a call, or see how he was getting on, or or support him in any way, shape or form. And ultimately the players knew and saw that. Obviously Paulo in the end left, and then, as I said, some of the other bigger players then moved on as well. And it was, it was a shame, really, because, as I say, the team went from having sort of, players that have been in and around World Cups and Champions Leagues and won leagues, and they had a very sort of solid quality squad, being depleted to, what I'd classed as really sort of not even championship players in the end, with some of the signings and the players that came in, and they knew, and the players that came in knew as well that they weren't they weren't sort of Sheffield Wednesday calibre, or certainly of what Sheffield Wednesday had been used to over that period of time, in terms of calibre of players.
Is it hard for you at the time, being sort of an England under-16 international, and for your boyhood club, seeing the club implode in the way that it did, and not having the power or the ability to change anything? Was that a tough time for you?
Yeah, and at the same time, you're trying to, really tough, because at the same time you're trying to sort of prove yourself in a negative environment. You're trying to show that I've got something to offer in a negative environment where the manager doesn't support or doesn't feel you're good enough for his team. So it was really tough. It was tough for all of us. It was really tough for all of us, and it wasn't. Under Danny Wilson's era, the team. So you've got a team that under Ron Atkinson, a youth team under Ron Atkinson, had got to the quarterfinals of the FA Youth Cup, had won the Youth Premier League, and in Danny Wilson's first year, he released the majority of that squad and only put two players, from that squad into the first team, that was through necessity rather than sort of opportunity, through to injuries, and I think a few players were saying they're injured when they weren't actually injured. I know that for a fact. They were sort of stretching out the recovery on their injuries, and then ultimately they went from, when Danny Wilson got the sack at the end of the season, when they got relegated, they were in a position where they had to play youth players because obviously they got relegated to the Championship or Division 1. They had to play youth players. Those youth players at the time, weren't quite up to standard because they were trying to cut costs and save money and all that kind of stuff. And they ended up getting relegated again and getting relegated down to League 1 or Division 2 as it was at the time. So, yeah, I mean, it was really hard to see, really hard to take at the time. But you move on and you get on with it.
Was there a moment where you confronted Danny Wilson or the management on regards to what's going on with your career, in regards to moving forward yourself?
There's probably a regret. No, didn't. At the time, I didn't have an agent or anything like that either. Probably should have. Probably, should have put it to him. But you do, at that time in that environment, it's probably something you would do now in today's environment. Players have a lot more power and say. Certainly, professionals, even if you've not played a first team game, junior professionals, they've got a lot more power and say. But at the time, not. It was, don't go in the. Don't. You felt that there was only 3 reasons why you went in the manager's office. One was either you were in trouble, you were getting released, or you had a chance of getting into the first team squad. So you never, and that was always on invite only. You never went and knocked on his door really. So yeah, if I had the maturity that I had now, but obviously at 17, that's never going to be the case. So 17, 18, that's never going to be the case.
I'm guessing, like you said, it's very difficult because you don't want to rock the boat, but
yeah,
with the same respect, you want to play. You're there to play.
Exactly.
You want to prove and show everyone what you can do. How did you keep yourself motivated at this point, and what was going through your mind as a player?
If I'm honest with myself, I probably didn't do enough at that point because I felt that. Certainly in that season that Sheffield Wednesday got relegated, and ultimately, obviously, as I said, I got released from the club. Well, I say got released from the club. It was more. They said to me, "You can either stay and sit on your contract for another season, or we've got an opportunity for you to go to Hjk Helsinki," which is the same thing, but just worded differently. It was, yeah. I felt. I felt demotivated at the time, to be honest, and probably didn't focus as much as I should have done because I felt that the door was closed. I felt that no matter what I did, I wouldn't get an opportunity at that football club. So like probably a few of the players, you kind of go, well, what's the point? And that's what it kind of felt like for 4 or 5 months towards the end of my time at the club.
How was the conversation broken to you about contracts and about potentially moving to Helsinki? Can you remember that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I sat with Danny Wilson. He said he'd brought in, you know, he was mentioned to the strikers that he brought in at the time. It was, I think he brought, I can't even remember their names now. There was two lads from Scotland that he brought down from Scotland. There weren't any sort of big names. I can't remember them. That's how much of an impact they had. No disrespect to them, but it basically brought in 3 or 4 strikers that were a couple of years older than me, and he basically said to me, "Look, I don't see a future for you at Sheffield Wednesday. We've got interest from a team in Finland, Hjk Helsinki. You know, you can either sit the remainder of your contract out, or you can go and try and sort of forge a career in Helsinki." And you know, ultimately, that's what I tried to do.
Now, how'd you go from Winkelbank living, surrounded by your bigger brothers, everyone knows who you are, kind of looked after and respected in that case, and sort of home comforts and family stuff, to then being a young black guy in Helsinki? Talk to me about that.
Oh, I mean, it was that was probably it had 2 impacts on me at the time. One, it took me out of my comfort zone completely, but it was really tough. It was really tough because obviously I didn't speak the language. Their first language isn't English. Their second language, even though they speak English, is Swedish. So first, not only the second language not English. It's you know, the first language not English. So the second language is not even English. So it was really tough. And adapting, I did find difficult, coming out of my comfort zone. I spent the first sort of 2 or 3 months in a hotel. Well, I said 2 or 3 months. It was longer than that, actually. Near on 6 months in a hotel. They put me up in a hotel, and that's where I was staying until I was ready to sort of get somewhere, rent somewhere. But I was in the hotel, and yeah, it was tough. I can't say it wasn't. I was obviously, you know, although the players, you know, tried their hardest to integrate me. There was only one player that spoke any sort of reasonable English. The manager spoke really good English, but other than that, the majority of the squad didn't. And the tough thing for me was, although football's a universal language, and you know, it was really tough. Mentally, it really drained me, because obviously I was outside of my comfort zone. I was trying to prove myself at the same time, and not so much learn a language, but certainly learn how to be understood and to understand the environment I was in. And yeah, it was a really tough experience. I mean, one thing, the hardest thing was we played a cup game. So the manager took us out for some food. We'd gone bowling and some beers, and we're all sat down, and they're all laughing and joking. But obviously, from my perspective, I don't understand what they're talking about. And the one lad who could speak a bit of English, you could tell that he was, you know, trying to get me to understand, but it was tough for him as well, because he's like getting in on a joke and then having to sort of half explain to me or make me understand what they were on about. And that's when, you know, it really started to sort of kick in, the sort of and my age really started to kick in as to, you know, where I was at, and that I probably, you know, wasn't quite ready for that experience. But at the other end of the scale, you know, it really did sort of made me sort of grow up, in a sense of maturity. Didn't realise it at the time, but it certainly did later down the line in terms of that experience, being in that environment. And I wouldn't say coping with it, because if I'd have coped with it, I'd have stayed out there. And you know, they wanted me to stay out there, and they offered me a 2.5-year deal at the time, and I'd have continued. I was doing reasonably well. I had a decent start in terms of footballing side of things, but off the field is where I couldn't really cope.
In terms of what? Just being isolated, in terms of
not
communicate with people, not having that network?
Yeah, it was just the social aspect. You know, training was fine. You know, the football element was brilliant. So no real issues there, because as I said, football's a universal language. So it wasn't, you know, once we started, they I got the rhythm of the team and how they played, and they understood how I played a little bit. It made things a lot easier. But it was more the social aspect. So once training finished, once I was back in the hotel, the evenings, you know, days off, stuff like that. It was that side of things. It was very lonely. And again, as I said, the players did their best, but there were only so much they could do. They've got their bubbles and their environment. So yeah, it was that element that was tough, and it wasn't a case of, you know, every weekend I could jump home or jump in the car and go back home. You know, that just wasn't the option.
So you've gone from being sort of isolated and being in your own bubble in Helsinki to then being probably in one of the most sociable places in the world, in Derry, Northern Ireland. Got from one extreme to another.
To another, yeah. Yeah, and that's where, again, so I'd gone from, and that's probably where my professionalism let me down when I went to Derry. And what I mean by that is although I was playing some good football, I was doing really well. You know, the social aspect of Derry probably got the better of me. And again, there's never a point where I was going out before games or anything like that. Certainly not. I was still sort of 100% focused on the football. But there's elements where, you know, maybe I could have done it better. Let's just put it that way. I could have done it better, and probably would have had a more successful career out in Derry if I'd have done it better. And you know, as I say, you know, Derry is a lively place. They're very welcoming people. It's surprising actually, because you know, you hear stories of, you know, when you go into Northern Ireland about this and that, and you know, obviously all the stuff that's in the headlines or was in the headlines around about those times, and I never saw any of it other than the police elements on the streets. There was never any animosity towards me. I guess that, as an English person, there was never any animosity towards me or anything like that. And yeah, it was. I'd say it was. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my time in Derry, and I enjoyed the people. It was good. It was good.
Yeah, having spent quite a lot of time in Northern Ireland, I really like it there.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I've only been in the city centres, so I'm getting, like anywhere, it'll have its good places and darker places.
Yeah.
But what a city. What a city.
Yeah,
I can see how you can easily be led astray in Derry, especially having the status as well as a footballer and being quite young and having the money to spend.
Yeah.
Do you think that all sort of got the better of you at that time?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I was, like I said, I was on decent money, and in Derry, although, you know, it's a kind of a small place, so if you're, you know, you play for Derry City, everybody knows that you play for Derry City, and you know, your name is everywhere. You know, it's one of them. You go for a pint, everybody knows who you are straight away. There is that celebrity status, to be fair, and it did feel like that. I can't say it didn't. It did. Everybody knew who I was, and I'd not really, you know, I'd not really experienced that. I mean, in Sheffield, obviously, you know, people knew that I was a professional footballer, but nowhere near at the level that I wanted to be, and nowhere near at the level that would have warranted any sort of real recognition. But at Derry, that's when I felt that experience, and I did enjoy it. I'm not gonna lie, I did enjoy it.
What was the next career journey for yourself after Derry?
So I was at Derry, and then, as I said, the sort of lifestyle probably got the better of my performances, and came back to England, and then it was really a drop into sort of the non-league element. I was trying to, my sort of expectations were higher than what they should have been at the time in terms of where I wanted to play, and how much I sort of commanded. We were in the midst of the ITV digital collapse, so lots of lower league teams, were offering money that I at the time didn't sort of feel was sufficient, and I did have an agent at this time, and I guess sort of the experience of Derry sort of inflated my expectations, my own value beyond what it should have been, which put me in a situation where, as I say, I felt I should get one thing, and ultimately it wasn't there because the money wasn't there. So after sort of turning down quite a few, what now I look back at were decent offers, I ended up sort of falling into the non-league game just because I didn't accept any of the offers that were on the table. Then when I was ready to, they weren't there. So that's my own stupidity and naivety at the time. So I ended up falling into the non-league game, and that's where I started at. I think it was Worksop was the first team, and then I went on to Maltby, and then I had my first stint at Stocksbridge, which would have been around 2002, 2003.
And before we get into Mulberry and Stockbridge and Grays and stuff, I want to... Was that for you?
That's mine, sorry.
That's what I was getting worried then. Yeah, before we get into that stuff, I want to touch on how your mental health is at this stage of your career. Because you've gone from like one extreme to another, from being a hot prospect, England international at Sheffield, then having that new experience and being quite isolated in Helsinki, to then being like the main man in Derry, or like being like top tier in that community. How do you then handle that drop to non-league? How do you deal with that as a professional, for your ego, for your working career, and as a man with your earning capacities and stuff?
Denial. That's how I did. That's how I dealt with it at the time. Denial. I sort of lived. There was certainly a period of, I'd say, 4 or 5 years, which is a long time, but certainly from 2003 right through to 2007, I lived life with blinkers on, and didn't really accept the reality of where I was in life, both professionally and personally. So I kind of sort of had this sort of perception of myself where, right, okay, I'm in non-league, but I'm still at the level of what Derry was, or my perception was that, and I tried to sort of project that to hopefully then get back to where I thought I should be. And it was tough. As I say, it was more denial. I'd put myself probably in situations that I certainly wouldn't do now. Certainly from a financial point of view, and decision making and purchases and this and that, and the devil knows what, that I did end up sort of having to dig myself out of. But yeah, as I say, the denial would have been the biggest thing for me at that time. Was not accepting where I was at, and not accepting the reality of actually, I don't want to say I hit rock bottom, because I could still feed and clothe myself and all those type of things. But from a professional point of view, and from where I was at point of view, the environment that I'd come from, for me, professionally, it was a rock bottom. I was a non-league player, and it was tough accepting that you're going from being a pro, being training every day, being a professional, to not being a professional, to working, to having to try and find a job, or thinking it, or at least starting to think about that, which I didn't really. And I tried to still live a champagne sort of lifestyle when I wasn't in that environment anymore.
Did you notice certain friends sort of dropping out of your social circle a little bit? People that you spent unnecessarily time or money with, more because you both had things in common, such as liking nights out, rather than you see them
definitely
start to drift.
Yeah, I mean, that happened sort of later on. I'd say certainly over that, as I say, when I came back to England So that 4 or 5 year sort of period where, you know, I started any, you know, basically I was living off the money that I'd earned previously. And so I still had that allure of being a professional footballer, even though I weren't a professional footballer at the time. I was in non-league over that period, but I still kind of lived the lifestyle that suggested I was in and around that environment, which was my mistake, obviously. But certainly, you know, from 2007, 8 onwards, when it was right, okay, reality actually did give me a good kick in the teeth and say you need to sort yourself out now and you know, think about what your career looks like as a working career. Still involved in football, obviously, but you know, you have to go to that next. You get a job basically. That's when you start to notice. Hang on a minute, the person that's ringing you every Friday and not Friday, but every Saturday night, or the people that ring you every Saturday night is now becoming less and less, and your circle's changing. And when I say changing, it mainly just reverted sort of back to the ones that were there before football. Now they were always a constant, but there was maybe not that consistent connection there. There was always a constant, you know, phone call, text, you know, occasional beer every now and then. But the friends that were there when I left school, pretty much, in and around that environment, are the friends that I'm still with now, with obviously the ones that were genuine people in the game that I'm still friends with, if that makes any sense. But that number has diminished from, let's say, 20 or 30 people down to a handful that I'd really, you know, I've still got a lot of associates through the game and people I've met, and but what I would class as the ones that I would, you know, really class as close friends now are a handful.
Do you think there's a lot of fake people in football? Do you think football's a little bit shady in terms of
yes,
everybody is competing against each other, bottom line? As much as you guys are friends, you are teammates, you're paid a job to play in a position, and people will come and go. Do you think that gives football more of a frivolous look on each other rather than a genuine feel, if I'm explaining that?
I've always said football's full of snakes. Football is a cesspit full of snakes. And there's always, in any environment, there's always an exception to that rule. But what I would say is, you know, in most working environments, you've got if you do well, you progress. And football's the same. But because everybody is trying to take everybody else's job, ultimately, you know, whether you're a manager, whether you're a player playing in a certain position or in the team, that's what the environment is. It breeds that mentality of, you know, well, I have to smile in your face because I have to smile in your face, but ultimately, you know, I want you not to do well because I want your shirt. There's that subconscious that's saying that, although it'll never be said publicly. No manager will ever say, I want that manager to lose his job, but at the same time, if he lost his job, I'm the first one going for it. You know, that's the environment, and same with playing. Now, as I say, you've got people in the game that are the exception to that rule, and I've got friends that prove that. As I said, I've got, you know, people like Paulo Di Canio still in the game, Andrew Douglas still in the game. They were both players and they're now football agents. You know, I've been friends with them since the late 90s. We met funnily enough, they were both at Arsenal at the time. I was at Sheffield Wednesday. We met in Ibiza, of all places. We had just bumped into each other at the in the hotel. We were staying in the same hotel as each other, and we've been friends ever since, and close friends. You know, I got married last year. They were both on the stag do and came to the wedding and stuff. And I've been to their weddings and kids and all the rest of it. So yeah, we're there are exceptions to that rule, but football definitely is an environment for false fakeness, and you know, it'll always be like that. It'll always be like that.
I want to talk about your time at Stockbridge, which is quite interesting in itself. Yeah. Talk me through it from your point of view. How did you enjoy your time at the club?
It was weird because I was at Sheffield FC. and I just sort of I'd done really well at Sheffield FC, and we just missed out on promotion the season before, and then that current season I'd broke it. I think it was 2008, 2009 season, and I'd just come back from a broken shin, and Sheffield FC were going through some difficulties at the time, some financial difficulties, which led to me moving on to Stocksbridge. Now Stocksbridge had an established unit as a squad in there. It was a decent squad. Obviously, no secret, Jamie Vardy was there at the time as well. And at the time, obviously, Jamie Vardy he would have been, what would I have been? I would have been sort of 28, 29. So he would have been around sort of 22. He's 8 years younger than me, yeah. So I'd have been, 21. He'd have been like 20, 21, 22, and I'd have been 28, 29 off the top of my head. And yeah, it was a brilliant environment to go into, to be honest. Some great lads, some great characters. You had Stevie O's in there. He was a lad that was, I think, only recently his youngest ever player to play for Sheffield United. I think that's been broken since, but he was there, and you had a kid called Glyn Cochrane, or we call Cockers. He was an unbelievable character. Obviously, you had Jamie Vardy in there and a couple of others. So you had some great characters in that dressing room. So it was an already an established environment. So coming into it, and you've got Stocksbridge and Sheffield FC, which are massive rivals at that level. So yeah, it was a bit of a moment when I came into the squad, but they welcomed me in, and we had some great times and some great stories. And it was, we won the playoffs, we won the League Cup as well, Sheffield Senior Cup. So yeah, we had some good times there.
Obvious question. Now I know you're going to say Vardy. You showed Vardy a lot of your runs and stuff. And did you know that Vardy had the potential to go up the levels when you were playing alongside him?
Well, me and Jamie, we travelled in together to, he'd go into training together because he actually worked near at the steel factory near where I lived. So he'd jump in with me, and or I'd jump in with him, and we'd go to training or games together. I'd say no. I've got to be honest. I'd say no. The thing with Jamie is he was the fittest player in the club by an absolute mile, and it was machine-like to how fit he was. It was ridiculous, and his fitness was a joke. And he was relentless with his running in games in terms of closing people down, in terms of working hard. But that was we were all like that at that time. To be fair, we were all like that, and he was just doing whatever we all did. The manager expected it others. But the technicals, is very raw. So the technical side of his game, that's developed over time to take him to the levels he's at. But his work rate and his attitude and his pace, obviously, was lightning quick. That's what I would say is he managed to get a lot more opportunities because of his work rate, because of his goals in games. Because of his work rate, because of his pace, he got a lot more opportunities to score because of that fact. That he might get sort of 10 chances in a game and score 2 or 3, and that's what it was. It was a numbers game with Jamie, and over time he's improved that ratio, because obviously as you get higher up, the chances you actually get in a game reduce because the quality of the players is higher. So from my perspective, I didn't see Jamie, certainly, I saw he could play higher, 100% saw he could play higher at the levels. But did I see him going on to play in the Premier League, getting 100 goals and playing for England and in the World Cup and winning the Premier League? No, I don't think anyone at that time would have said that.
It's kind of like the ultimate fairy tale, isn't it? The ultimate football fairy tale of Jamie Vardy's career. Yeah. Especially like you had first-hand experience seeing the struggles that he was going through from at the factories and stuff, and you driving him in to now. Yeah, you mentioned the honours and accolades he's won. 100 goals recently as well. Not just fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, unbelievable. And as I said, it ultimately it's less about ability and more about his work rate. And that's all I can say. I mean, you come back from pre-season, he was always at the front. In any running, doesn't matter what it was, he was always at the front, and at the front by some distance. And in games, he'd work hard. And the thing is, his sort of the perception of his, Jamie Vardy have a party, he earned that right because he'd work hard and play hard. It's as simple as that. And he did. I mean, the stories I could tell you, and I'm not going to, but the stories I could tell you about, we went on an end of season to Blackpool, and put it this way, we all wanted to go to sleep. And if he could have stayed there the rest of the week, he would have. That's the way he was. He worked hard, but the end of the week, after he'd done his shift and done what he was paid to do, he'd want to have a good time, and he'd earned that right, 100%, and it was no different. And I don't think he's any. Obviously, probably a lot more discipline in it now because of his profile, but there's not much. There's not much that's changed about him as a character.
Is Vardy a one-off in your opinion, or do you feel there are players equally as talented as Jamie Vardy in the non-league setup?
Yeah, I think so.
Be brutally honest as well.
I think so, definitely. I mean, obviously, I'm coaching and managing in that environment now, and I'm not just saying that. I think that you've got the problem is sort of because Jamie Vardy was such a, as you say, a fairy tale. There's been a lot more sort of focus and a lot more light shone on the non-league circuit now. But I think the mentality is people are looking at Jamie Vardy as the example and saying, right, well, they're looking for attributes in and around what Jamie Vardy had. Whereas, as I said, anybody at the time looking at Jamie Vardy would not have suggested that he would have gone on to have the career he's had. So it's about looking at sort of, what attributes made Jamie Vardy into the player he is. And that's down to, obviously, his hunger, his work rate, and his ability to improve, which is what is shown. Now, in non-league, there are players that certainly have the hunger and have the desire of Jamie Vardy. And some of them, certainly from what I've seen, I would say technically, if you were comparing the two, would be better players. But the attitude now from coaches is they're looking at sort of, as I say, they're still looking for that X factor. Whereas, Jamie Vardy, other than his pace and his desire and his work rate, his X factor has come through what he's developed as stepping up each time. Obviously, he went on to Halifax, then Fleetwood in quick succession, then on to Leicester, all in sort of, he only had a season at Halifax, a season at Fleetwood, and then he's at Leicester, and each time he's playing with, training with, and against better players. So he's had to improve his game over that, quick period of time to get him to the level he's at now. I'd say definitely there's players that are capable of certainly playing in and around the Championship and Premier League that are in non-league football at this moment in time. Whether they'll get the opportunity to, that's another question.
From your point of view, what happened after Stockbridge? Where did you go?
So after Stockbridge, Stockbridge got promoted, and then I found, due to, as I say, Jamie Vardy, then that second season, or my second season at Stockbridge, is where Jamie Vardy really excelled. I was that was 30 and turning 31 at the time. So, my best days were, well and true behind me, because that would have been 2009, 2010. So, I'd have been 30, 31. So my sort of, he was the sort of, he's a rising star, as you know. So he kind of sort of started more games than I did. So I moved on to Gould, and then stayed at Gould for a couple of years. did reasonably well. Got over 100 goals while I was at goal. It's the same sort of level as Stocksbridge. So still had the ability to score goals at that level, and did so at my time at goal. And I enjoyed my time at goal. Didn't have any sort of success, more about mid-table mediocrity really, but still scored quite a few goals at that level.
At this time.
Oh, but this just to, in terms of timeline, this is all after my time at Grays.
Okay. What was Grays like? You enjoyed your time?
Yeah, so it was weird because I stopped when I went into non-league. I went into non-league, as I say, at Stocksbridge. Left Stocksbridge, and then went to Grays. Now, I went up to Grays on the back of a trial, really. Some of my mates that were still in the game, football, as I say, Paulo Di, I think he was at Rockford at the time, and a few others. They advised me of an agent that was working in and around London, said, "Oh, Grays are a decent team, get yourself down there." So I went down and trialled at Grays and got an opportunity with Mark Stimson, signed a deal down there. And again, that was outside of my comfort zone, living in Washwood Heath in London, in Essex. And yeah, it was good times, really. Had a lot of success down there, won the league, won the FA Trophy. And ultimately scored a few goals while I was down there. So yeah, it was good time down at Grays.
This is just about the time that Essex is sort of coming into its own as a nightlife area.
Yeah.
Big region coming on the map in terms of profile and big club nights and stuff. How did you find the Essex way of life?
Yeah, it was. I mean, faces is the first thing that's going to spring to mind. And yeah, it was good. The thing was, we had, because of the group of players we had, it was a lot more. We did it at the right time, certainly, in terms of enjoying the nightlife. We never did it where it would jeopardise us for midweek games or weekend games or anything like that. So it was always in and around that. We had Mark Stimson, the coach at the time. We were a lot. It was did a lot of double sessions, so morning and afternoon sessions. It was back to full time as well, but so we did get to enjoy the nightlife. A lot more Sunday sessions were on the cards. Certainly when we didn't have midweek games, so we were. So and to be fair to the gaffer at the time, he did give us a few Mondays off, so it was all right doing it on a Sunday instead of Saturday. But yeah, certainly the Essex nightlife and the London nightlife. I did get accustomed to it, but it didn't affect us as a group of players because, as I said, we had success, and you don't have success if you do it too much.
Are you starting to think about your management career at this time? Your coaching? Are you taking your badges? Are you actively trying to gain a knowledge base to stand you in better stead for going forward?
Yeah, well, I've done all that. So I'm currently an A licensed coach. I've done all my badges right up to my A license. Completed that in 2012, I think, 12 or 13. In fact, it's on here. When did I do it? 2016. Sorry, I did my B license in 2012. So I've completed my A license. I've done my advanced youth awards. So I've got basically ticked all the badge boxes for that. I've coached since sort of coming towards the end of my career. I've coached amateurly, a Sunday side. I've done academy coaching at Rotherham United for several years, and now I've been a manager at non-league Brighouse Town for the last 4 years, and I've done that since 2017. It's at step 4 of the non-league system. So, like, if Conference National step 1, we're currently at step 4, and we've had some reasonable success while I've been manager at Brighouse. We won the playoffs in 2019. Unfortunately, because of the technicality with the league, and some idiot in a suit decided that teams would win the playoffs but not get promoted, which was a crazy decision. We weren't promoted despite winning the playoffs. We were one of two teams that weren't promoted despite winning the playoffs. So yeah, I feel that I'm on that path already, and that's the way I want to sort of go and see how far it takes me. I'm enjoying it. It's certainly been difficult. I was first team coach alongside Simon Weaver at Harrogate Town as well, leading up to this job. So that led me into the sort of first team management environment. Working with Simon Weaver, who's been a great sort of person to learn from and get ideas from. Someone who was, funnily enough, he was a little bit older than me, but we were at Sheffield Wednesday together, me and Simon Weaver. So that was, working together was good as well. So yeah, I feel that I'm just building all those elements of from a coaching and a managerial aspect now. I'm doing all that now, and seeing where I can get with it all.
Are you enjoying the manager side of it? Some players I speak to, they sometimes are really into it. Other players, it took a little while to get that love and same buzz from playing. How do the two transcend for yourself? How does it mesh? It's difficult because I never saw myself as a manager, to be honest. Never saw myself going into coaching or anything like that. And if you were to ask a lot of people in and around football, they would have probably said the same thing. So it's something I kind of fell into and then fell in love with and not looked back since, and really taken to it. So from the enjoyment side of it, it's me, 100%. Love every minute of it. Yes, it's a very lonely place. That's one thing I'll say about management. It's a very lonely place. But no matter what anyone tells you, you're the person that everybody's looking for the answers from. Everything falls on your lap, good or bad, and you're the decision maker in every aspect. So, yeah, it is a lonely place, but for me that I've sort of taken to like a duck in water. I work as hard as I can in every aspect of it. It's although I'm working in a semi-professional environment, it's not. It's full time. You ask my wife, I'm on the phone, every pretty much every minute of the day, and it does consume a lot of your time. So you have to make sure your time management is on point, especially with us. We've got 2 young kids. And obviously a family life as well that we've got to make sure I've got time for and make time for, but then obviously making sure that I'm doing everything I can to progress the football forward as well. So yeah, it is very time consuming. It's something I enjoy. I love the buzz and business of it, and let's see where I get with it. There's been a lot of press and a lot of publicity regarding the lack of black managers in the Football League at present, and whether that be in a managerial capacity or even in a boardroom capacity. Having worked as a manager in non-league, do you feel that same argument or representation is equal for non-league, or is there more managers from a black sort of background in non-league?
I'd say it's similar. From my experience, so just to give you an example, when I decided that I was sort of going into management, so my first experience, obviously, as I said, came in the amateur game. Doing that, I've got a very strong reputation in non-league football as a player, certainly, and as my experience and contacts and everything else, and in and around non-league football and in and around the game itself that I'm still using to this day. So when I first sort of showed an interest in going into and started applying for managerial jobs before I got the opportunity at Harrogate Town, and that was more due to my friendship with Simon than I didn't really apply for anything. There wasn't anything available. It was more just sort of the friendship that said, you want to come in on board and sort of get involved in the first team with me. But before that, I was actually actively trying to get a management role in non-league. And it was difficult. Everything about me and my experience and my coaching qualifications would say, I warrant that opportunity. but never got it, and never got given that opportunity for reasons that are unexplained to this day. But you need to take them for what there is. And then when you look at the people that did actually get the job, I would personally question as to why I didn't. But you don't know those reasons; they're never explained to you, so you just get on with it. Now, what I will say is the opportunity that I got with Brighouse Town has come about because the chairman, or the chairman at the time, who's now the vice chair, Charlie Tolley, and James, and the football club is, it's a, you can see from the outset that it's a forward-thinking environment in terms of it's irrespective of any colour or any perception. It's about what you bring to the table, and are you good enough, or have you got the potential to be good enough? Do you understand what it takes? Have you got the knowledge, the contacts in the game, and all the rest of it? So that's why I got this opportunity, not for any other reason other than they believed that I could do what they wanted me to do, which was progress the club forward. And I think I've done that in the time. I certainly have done that, in the time that I've been here. So, yeah, in answer to your question, yes, I do think it's still similar to there's still similar issues. Do I think it's better represented? I'd have to say a little bit. If you look at the numbers, in terms of actual numbers, in terms of non-league, and in terms of the league, you'd have to say it's better represented. But there's still, I do think there's still a way to go. And again, it's about, for me, it's about, as you say, decision makers, and having a representation on in that environment to say, well, okay, let's weigh up, even in terms of before they interview people. But it's difficult. It's difficult because because football is such a unique environment. So I don't think there's any sort of silver bullet that answers the question of equality in management or coaching roles in football. I don't think there is a silver bullet. I just think you've got to get decision makers that represent the game in the conversation around when managers and coaches are being selected, because at least then it opens the eyes. If you've got human nature is a thing where people tend to be around people or associate with people generally that think or look like them. That's just a natural human way of thinking. But in order to improve, you have to have individuals that don't think like you, that think differently, that look differently. So you've got a wider spectrum of understanding, and helps you or what you're doing it get better. So yeah, I think there's an improvement, but there's a long way to go in non-league. And is it the same as league? I think it's probably edges it a little bit just from visually, certainly from what I've seen in terms of management and coaches.
I'd like to touch a little bit on how non-league in particular is dealing with the changes or the unforeseen changes that have been brought in by the COVID-19 situation, because we're seeing clubs go into administration. We're seeing potential clubs, again, big clubs, having financial issues. What are the implications, or what do you think the implications will be for lower league clubs? Because they're obviously dependent on the ground money and the revenue money. Yeah. And I'm not asking you to comment on your club and your situation quickly. I would rather just have a broader spectrum on how you feel that the non-league will cope with the unforeseen circumstances.
It has to, and I think it's going to be from a financial one. I think what you've seen from my perspective is that the money that's in, or been the team money that's in non-league, say from a playing aspect, has it's quadrupled, if not more, over the last sort of 5-10 years, in terms of because of the money that's coming to BT. And there's been this sort of trickle down effect where clubs have sort of maybe overstretched themselves, or you know, there's definitely been an increase in sort of wages and player wages and stuff like that. I think what's going to happen now, what you're going to think, and not only that, clubs have been sort of funding themselves on you know, paper foundations, or what I call paper mache foundations. So all that will be taken into check, and I think there'll be a lot more. You know, you've seen it already. You know, whereas clubs are more focusing on what they can actually do and what they can actually afford, and looking at ways of being self-sufficient rather than sort of taking a risk and overspending and really having that one sugar daddy that's keeping them afloat. Because what you find is, if you've not got a sustainable football club, that situations like this end up sending the clubs under. And you know, these football clubs are some of them are backbones to the community. So, you know, when they go, you know, a lot of the community aspects of that area dies, or a portion of it dies with it as well. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a big change in the finances of non-league football. I think that's going to be a big thing that you see.
I think you just raised a really valid point there with regards to the hub of the towns and the cities, lower league clubs. The amount of people that volunteer for the clubs or are involved in the club in some capacity, whether that be their young child playing for a youth team or for the fundraising events or the fun days, taking these clubs away, the point I'm trying to make, and reiterate your point, it leaves a big hole in these communities.
Definitely. I mean, we've got sort of several volunteers now. Our volunteers at the football club, the football club is their sort of, I don't know, without being disrespectful, their sort of bingo at the weekend. It's their social element of their week, because there are a lot of retirees that come into the football club and, you know, do their bit and whatever else, and that's their social element of the week. So, you know, for example, if a football club like ours, we're just one of thousands that are throughout the country. If a football club similar to ours, you know, goes under, you've got to think of the impact it has on all those individuals associated with the football club that ultimately use the football club as their sort of social aspect of their lives outside of the, you know, because obviously they're not working because they're retired, and it's not like they're going out and boozing everything and all the rest of it. So this is their social interaction that they get during the week.
Do you think there'll be a knock-on effect from the Premier League? We've already seen clubs looking like a little reluctant to lay out big transfer fees. We see players of a certain age maybe not having their contracts renewed on two-year deals. We're seeing players leave. Do you think that will have a knock-on effect for Championship, Division 1, 2, 3, and then non-league? So the money will drop.
It has to. It has to. I mean, you know, the reality is that football clubs for too long have lived in a bubble of, you know, this recession-proof bubble where, you know, that's not the case. That's not the case. Eventually, it was always going to come down to, you know, getting things back in check and being able to actually afford what you want to do. And yeah, I think that there's going to be less. There has to be, because, you know, your clubs spending 90% of their turnover on wages, which is, you know, that's ludicrous, to be quite frank. It's crazy. So yeah, I think all that has to be, you know, football clubs themselves. You know, it's all right trying to put legislation and things in place and all that to try and force them to do it. But football clubs themselves will recognise that, hang on a minute, this is, you know, now because of COVID-19, it's a massive shock to the system. Because without fans, football clubs can't bring the revenue that they want. And this is something now, because of the way the world's so small, that an outbreak in one country could shut another country down in a matter of days and weeks just through the travel system. So football clubs have got to be aware of that now and got to be more revenue proof rather than recession proof, to see that if something affects the revenue, it's not going to kill the football club.
I know it's hard, and I'm only speculating here, but do you think this will have long-term implications on youth talent, on players in the academy who have coming through that system, the whole break that we've had from the youth football, the lack of what's the word I'm looking for, structured environment from the clubs for these players that have been in since they were 7 or 8. Do you feel this will be a difficult period for future talents? That's what I'm trying
do you know what? I think it'll have I think it should have the other effect where clubs then go, right, okay, we can't afford it. Because ultimately, youth talent is cheaper than going out and having to buy someone. So there'll be, I think there will be, and there has to be a lot more focus now on football clubs developing their own talent. Excuse me, and bringing that through. So, I mean, from my sort of mentality at our football club, the captain of the team now was our under-16. We're under-16 player. He's now the captain of the first team at 21. So, certainly from my perspective, I'm looking towards the juniors and the youth and the football club and that conveyor belt to ultimately come into the first team as much as possible. And a lot of Premier League teams and league clubs will have to look to do that now, just because from a financial perspective, they'll look to invest in their youth more and give youth more of an opportunity. That would be the common sense approach to reducing overall costs when it comes to getting quality in the first team.
I feel with the cost reducing, which it looks like it's going to be a necessity for all clubs across the board to try and, like we said, reduce costs, promote youth. On top of that, we've got the uncertainty of what's going to happen with players' contracts regarding the whole Brexit situation. And younger players from foreign countries get in the country. Do you feel this is a real changing shift and could be a real springboard for young English players or young British players to try and get up the higher levels?
Ultimately, if there's more barriers or things in place to restrict players coming in from abroad and certainly, obviously, as you say, from Europe now, however that looks, it has to give more opportunities to young British players, because ultimately, each team needs a 25-man squad as a minimum. Obviously, most teams carry 30 players in and around their first team to account for injuries and stuff like that, and players moving on. So, I think it has to open the door now for managers to look at their youth, youth policies and youth structures a lot more, just to enable them to continue what they're doing or improve what they're doing. You've seen it happening at Chelsea. The financial restrictions that happened to them. So they've had a lot more. Because of the restrictions that have been put on them, they've you've seen a lot more of their youth players come through, and I think that'll come through the board. I mean, Liverpool are doing it as well. Obviously, City have you started to do it for the first time, what I would say in a long time, in terms of Phil Foden, and you'll see other clubs follow suit. I just think it's a natural progression or route that we're going to have to take because of the situation.
We've seen other countries have sort of regulations that make it so a certain number of homegrown players have to be in the squad for each match day. Do you feel that could be implemented in England? And on the basis of predicting that, has that anything to do with them making the extra substitutes available now for this season? Because it just seemed like a strange ruling to bring 2 more substitutes available at this point of the season. It just seems like it was snuck through quite quickly. You feel that has any bearing on a future quota of said English players needing to be in a squad?
I mean, my perception of the 5 substitute rule is more about the number of games that are being played in a short period of time, based on previous seasons, obviously before and the season itself before COVID. So I think it's more down to that, and I'm hoping it's a short-term change rather than a long-term, because I don't feel that it's really. It then becomes more like a training game or a friendly, where you can have 5 or in a training or friendly game can have limited substitutes. I know this is only 5, but it just doesn't have the right sort of feel, and I think it has too big an impact on the overall game itself and the dynamics of the game. Not in a positive way either, for me personally. So I don't think it will necessarily sort of then open the gateway to more players, youth players or English British players getting opportunities. I think that's more going to be down to the cost-cutting exercise, not any sort of quarters on substitutions or anything like that. The other part of your question in regards to homegrown players having to be in the matchday squad, that's already a quota. You already have to have 8. I think it's 8 in your 25-man squad. But then the next thing should be on the pitch, or actually in the actual, because you've got a matchday squad, I think, of 25 players or 20 players. I'm not entirely sure. I forgot what the matchday squad is. Of that squad, you need to have, of your squad of 25 that you registered this season, you have to have 8 in that 25 that are homegrown. But it doesn't say those 8 have to be on the pitch at any time at all, which is, I think, the next step, which should have, a minimum of 2, 3, 4, whatever, on in the 16 or is it 19 that you can have available on the bench.
I know you're living, learning, and you've got a young family, and you're doing everything in your power to aspire to get to where you're going. But do you feel that the hand is stacked against you sometimes with management, where we're not seeing black managers get the amount of opportunities that, say, for instance, other managers have had? Do you feel that sometimes that things are against you going in?
Yeah, I mean, my sort of mentality on even the job that I've got now is, if I were to I have to make a success. So I'll give you an example. So there's been other opportunities at clubs, league above, but those clubs have been obviously struggling in relegation zones. That I've thought, shall I go in there and have a go? And I've spoken to pals in the game, and sort of the attitude towards it is, where I'm at the minute, I'm at a club where the chairman backs me, the football club backs me in every aspect of my decision making and every aspect of what I'm doing. We've been through periods of tough times in my first year of management, and they supported me all the way through it, all the way through to the periods of success that we're now currently having. Now, my sort of mentality towards it is, if I was to go to another football club, not get that support, get the sack, then the opportunity for me to get another job would be limited or much more difficult than someone else in the same situation. And that's just been proven by the game. You see, and I know managers that have had zero success consistently at this level and around this level, but for some reason keep getting jobs, good jobs as well. And it doesn't make sense. There's no logical reason as to why these managers going from, taking a team that was in, playoff contenders one season, taking them to on the brink of relegation, then getting another team with a good budget and that opportunity. So I look at that and think, well, that doesn't make sense. How are those same individuals getting the decent jobs consistently all the time? It just doesn't make sense from a decision-making point of view. Yes, they've got a name in terms of they've been around the non-league circuit for a long, long time, but it doesn't make sense in terms of, well, how can you look at that as, if you're looking for someone who's going to give you success, going with the same people that haven't had success doesn't make sense. So from my perspective, I feel that if I need to really sort of build my CV up twice as much almost, because I feel that, if for example I go to another job and fail, the opportunity for me, or the chances of me getting another job would be difficult. I go that from my own previous experiences. So that's why I've doubled down on what I'm doing now, because I'm in an environment where, as I said, I'm backed. I feel I can achieve my ambitions, or some of my ambitions with this football club. So that's, rather than looking at the grass being greener on the other side. It's limited to me to take. It's limiting me to take a chance with a team that might be higher up, just because it may have an adverse effect on me long term. And that's not having confidence in my own ability. That's more about navigating a path to get into where I want to be. Really.
In your opinion, how does football become an equal playing field for white managers, black managers, Chinese managers, whoever skin tone, based on how does it become this is the best person for the job situation rather than this is a demographic or a box that we need to tick?
Yeah.
In your opinion, how does football change to that?
For me, we revert back to the decision making. If you've got 3 people that it's not always the case in football, I know, but there's always a board or a committee. And if you've got the people that are making a decision, if you've got a person of colour in that room, help him sort of question or just give a different perspective. And it's not a case of, right, at the end of the day, I might be up against a job against another white manager, and if I'm not, and if everything on that white manager's CV and experience means that they're better for the job than me, then they get the job. 100%. That's how it should be. No problems with that whatsoever. It's where you've got maybe 2 equal experienced managers, or you've got one manager. So let's say for someone like myself who may have more experience or more success or whatever, to ensure that an equal and fair process has been administered for that role. You need someone in there, in the room, make a decision, a person of colour, that is going to sort of, look at it from both perspectives. And then at least you've got a debate going on in that environment where, what about the black coach, or what about the manager of colour, or whatever, or what about someone who's not been tried and tested? It's even that as well. There's even that element of it as well. It's not just necessarily. I do understand the issue with black managers, but there's also an issue where there's not only there's 2 things that are stacked against managers. There's one element of it from the black perspective, but there's also an element of it, right, we'll go with this guy because he's done it 1,000 times with no success, but he must know what he's doing because all these clubs have had him before, even though he's never achieved anything. We'll not go with Joe Bloggs, who he's got all the boxes ticked, but he's only managed at Tim Pot Alley or whatever. I'm just making examples there, but it's that side of things that needs to change, and the only way you do that is you change the dynamics of the boardroom, and until that happens, then we're just going to have the status quo. That's the way it's going to be until the dynamics of boardrooms change. Then to be more inclusive, then you're always going to have these sort of barriers, or it just reduces the questions. That's all. If you've got people in the boardroom that are diverse.
Seeing women's football getting a lot more funding, getting a lot more attention, a lot more transit, it seems to be not a secondary thing anymore, where the women sometimes were lucky if they got to use the men's facilities to train at some clubs, or lucky if the club even had a women's team. What are your thoughts on women's football, where it is now, and how the game's evolved?
Yes, it's come miles. Certainly since in the last 4, 5, 10 years. We've got women set up within our football club that we're really proud of. It's doing really well and progressed really well. And for me, it's it's like anything in it. The women have they've had to overcome their own barriers and social discrimination as such, and they're doing a great job with that. And for me, while ever the football exists, I think women certainly should be at the forefront of the conversation just as much as the men's. Obviously, when we're talking about finances in football, that's going to be down to what at the end of the day, it's what the demand is. If the demand for the finances is there from a sponsorship, from a supporter's point of view, then certainly. But from everything else, it should be on an equal playing field.
We've had some higher profile players on, some in support of the women's game, some obviously not so much, as is their opinions and stuff. Do you feel we'd ever see a woman manager in the Premier League? Do you think that the discrimination we were speaking about regarding black managers?
Yeah. No, it's a fair point.
To come on to this, do you think we'd ever see a woman manage in the Premier League?
Listen, it's a fair point. I mean, you've got a lot of men managing in the women's game, coaching in the women's game. Listen, I guess that's for me, I'd have no issue or umbrance with it. It's something that if they're good enough, and that's what it's got to be down to. If there's there's certainly quality women coaches out there and women managers out there, as you've seen with the likes of Hjk Powell and whatnot. So they're certainly there. Whether the question becomes down to not whether they want, because I'm sure they want to. It becomes down to, I think it's more the social element of it. Now, do I think that's right or wrong? You're asking the wrong person on that. I think socially as a not only as a nation but as a people, we've got to change. But I think the first hurdle is that getting a woman manager into a men's Premier League football environment. It would be the social aspect that needs to be overcome, and I think that's just time. I think that's a matter of time, and yeah, that's it's a difficult one to really comment on, just because I think it's like I say, it's the social aspect that's holding it back more than anything else. Yeah, that's it really.
My uncle Bob once placed a bet in the 60s on a woman to ride in the Grand National.
Right.
And at the time, everybody thought he was crazy. He collected that bet. So
fair play.
Times and generations change, don't they? What was crazy in the 60s is obviously now the norm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's it. And I think it's just a matter of. I think it's a time. There's always boundaries being broken all over the place. So it's only a matter of time before that boundary is broken. We've got a woman manager in the Premier League.
I want to point out to any of our viewers, I'm not condoning you to put your life savings on me, a woman to manage in the Premier League. But if you did want to have a slight flutter on it, then again, I can give you my blessing on that one. Got to say, Bill, it's great to get you on. I've really enjoyed talking with you today.
Thank you.
I know what you're about and what you're doing, and your next stage of your journey, I'm sure is going to be a great passion of yours, and it'd be great to watch on the outside. Thank you very much for talking to Full Court Football. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you. Me too.
I look forward to catching you up soon, and hopefully we see what's going on with the return of non-league football soon enough.
Yeah. And if ever, you're more than welcome to, if ever you're in and around the Huddersfield Brighouse area and you want to catch a game, we're more than welcome to make sure you're looked after.
Do you know what? I'd like to come down with a camera one day and film one of your speeches. That would be great.
Yeah.
See Vill work and my day with Vill or something. That would be brilliant.
Yeah. More than welcome, buddy.
Love that.
More than welcome.
Vill, best regards. Give love to the family.
Brilliant.
And I'll catch you real soon.
Brilliant. Thank you. Cheers, buddy. Take it easy.